Welcome to the Fantastic Story Society, a place for the most unusual stories and storytellers, including your masters of ceremony, Max Tim and Scott Marcus.
That opening video will never not make me laugh.
It's kind of funny. And, you know, when we don't do super spooky episodes, I don't always play that. Yeah. But I want to this time because that we have to say RIP to where that video was shot, which was the Lakehouse in Edgerton, this historic. And yes, as you saw from those videos, parts of it were creepy and decrepit. It was an old hotel on top of a still functioning and working pub and restaurant that they were hoping to renovate the hotel and make that, you know, as it once was, but it burned down not too long ago. Yeah. So we've lost a really historic place.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see what. Hopefully, they can get some kind of insurance claim and keep that alive, because not the whole thing burned to a crisp, but a lot of it did. And
I mean, it's really devastated. But yeah, there are stone walls that still exist, and the original parts of that building are older than the state of Wisconsin. Right. So I mean, that's how old we're talking here. So very sad. This past, I think it was February, late winter, we lost it. But
and it's crazy that this is the first podcast we've done since the inn went down, and so to all of our regular watchers or listeners, we apologize for being slow. But
thanks for sticking with us.
Yeah, but you're here again and you're watching us, and we have a really interesting guest today. And Scott's going to do the intro, but I'm excited because we're, like you were saying, Scott, this is a nice little intro to the coming summer season. Even though we are recording this in May in my brain kind of tells me, well, it's supposed to be nice out and it's supposed to be summertime. It isn't. I mean, it's sunny. But 52 degrees doesn't scream summer to me.
No, but this is great because we have time now to plan for all of our summer adventures. Right. And we have the perfect guest to come aboard. We will be getting into some supernatural, possibly, stuff towards the end, but we do want to just talk about going out and having fun, exploring nature. And Cliff has done so much. Cliff Jacobson is who I'm speaking of. And I'm just going to read the first sentence of his bio, which it's really, he's done so much in his life, but one of North America's most respected outdoor writers, wilderness guides, national and foreign consultants, and is the most published canoeing and camping writer of the 20th and 21st century, with books approaching 1 million copies.
Amazing.
Cliff Jacobson, welcome to the Fantastic Story Society.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here with you guys.
Cliff, do you consider yourself, like this word is thrown around a lot, an outdoor expert?
The word expert is a funny connotation. Okay. And I think it was Wilhelm Stephenson, on return from one of his many expeditions, was asked if he'd had any adventures. He said, nope, no adventures, only experiences. Yeah. Because the ones who have adventures are the people who don't know what they're doing.
Or they don't come back.
So, I guess the point is, do I consider myself an expert? I don't know. There's a lot of people who know a lot more about this stuff than I do. But I just have a certain way of doing things that has worked well for me for a lifetime. So, yeah, I know what I'm doing in the outdoors, but I hesitate to use that word.
Well, okay, so I'll ask this then. If the world ends tomorrow, would you be able to survive it?
Well, I'd probably be gone along with it. Probably not. If the world ended tomorrow, you mean if
there's if the
apocalypse grid, now is
if the power grid goes down and there's no
what can I say? I have a lot of outdoor knowledge. I have fishing gear. I have hunting gear. I have tents. I have whatever. Tents, stoves, guns, matches. But you know what? I live in River Falls, Wisconsin. So the only thing I could best do here is quietly some night go out and shoot a cow and butcher it. Okay? That'd be the best thing I could do. Because I think a lot of people would be heading either way up north or down south.
I start out with a really hard question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just again, still speaking on his credentials and experience, there's a line in his bio that makes me think of one of our favorite lines, Max, from Brian Regan, one of our favorite comedians, who talks about how self-assured you must be if you are one of the few astronauts who have actually walked on the moon. Because somebody could be at a dinner party just talking about how special they are. Well, you can eventually just chime in and say, well, I've walked on the moon. And
Well,
they use one. But looking at yours, there are people who can say like, I love canoeing, I love kayaking, I'm an outdoorsman, and then you could chime in and say, I'm in the Canoeing Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
well, here's the thing. I'll tell you a little story. Many years ago, there's a place, a place up north, about a 2-hour drive from River Falls, called Taylor Falls. Okay, Taylor Falls has it's a big rapid. There's a dam. It's a dam followed by a very big rapid. So a lot of canoeists and kayakers play around there. So once, many years ago, I was paddling my solo canoe, which I had built. It was a wood strip canoe, playing in the rapids, and they were setting up an international race course with the gates and so forth. Actually, it's a national whitewater course to see the winner would then go on to compete with the U.S. to go international. So there was a young woman there. I'll never forget. So I put ashore after playing around in this rapid. Her name was Kristen Frisch. Now, why I would remember this after all the years, I don't know. She was a cute little blonde in her very early 20s. She says to me, she says, Cliff, she says, I've been watching you out there. She says, you're pretty good. She said, would you take a run with me in my tandem canoe? We'd do a run through the gates. And she says, I need a partner and I don't have one. So, I'll probably get one later, but, would you do it? I said, sure. So we went through the gates and so forth, played in the whitewater. And afterwards she came out and she looked at me. She said, Cliff, you're pretty good at this. She said, maybe you ought to enter this race. And I looked at her and I said, Kristen, I'm kind of freaked out by great big rapids like this. And she said, she looked me right in the eye and she said, Cliff, you've got more skill than guts. When you do these big wilderness trips where help is an airplane ride away and the water is cold enough to kill you from hypothermia before you drown, you better not get in a situation that's over your head. Mm-hmm. So this to me was a great compliment. You have more skill than guts. The people who get in trouble in the wilderness are those who have more guts and skill.
True.
Really great advice, though. I mean, that's really great advice. Like, you can't just rely when you're in such a situation like that where it literally could be life and death. Guts have nothing to do with it, man. I mean, they have something to do with it, but you can't lean on it.
The irony on wilderness trips is if you ask people what they're afraid of or what the dangers of are, they're not at all what they really are. You ask anybody on the street, for example, many years ago, I canoed across the Everglades. And some of my friends said, I would never do that. The pythons will get you. Okay. Never saw a python.
Yeah.
All right. And when I go up north, I would never do one of those. Oh, there's polar bears. Oh, you'll get eaten by a polar bear. Or they're going to say you're going to drown in a rapid. The truth is, mostly those are not the things that are the dangers. Okay. The dangers are not using your judgment and maybe running a rapid you shouldn't. Okay. But more than that, it's not really the rapids. It's in a canoe. It's trying to cross a big lake to go from one part of the lake to another. When that wind comes up and those waves get to be three feet high, you better know what you're doing. Okay. And maybe you don't go straight across. Maybe you want to go around the edge, and that's fine. And it's what you should do. But if you have to be home on Monday and today is Sunday, you'll take a chance, and that will kill you.
Did you grow up just constantly camping with your family, or where did this love of the outdoors start?
It's with the Boy Scouts.
Oh, okay.
I lived in grew up in Chicago, and I started going on trips, and I loved it. To this point, I would add, since I've done this with so many people over the years, we guided so many people, I've learned that this love of the outdoors, it's a gene. You're born with it. You can be born with a gene that says like. If you do it enough and the conditions are right, that can grow to love. But if you're born with a gene that says hate, the best you might get to is tolerance. I've seen it so many times. And it doesn't matter whether people grow up in Chicago or Los Angeles or even the wilderness. I have some friends who their kids grew up in northern Minnesota in the wilderness and they hate it. They want to live in the Twin Cities.
Max, where do you land on this scale? Because I can't say that I think of you as an outdoorsman, but you kind of have the bug or the interest lately.
Yeah, I've never hated it, but I've never really tried to go camping, much less go canoeing. It's always been in the back of my head of something like, I think it would be neat, but I'm really worried about going to the bathroom. It's just figuring out where to go to the bathroom. If I can go a few days without a shower. That's no big deal. But it just simple things that I've grown so used to always having available, like a running water. It just is like, how uncomfortable am I going to be? But I've always had an affinity for the woods, and I'm not a big water person, so I don't think I'm going to be doing any kind of whitewater or river rafting or anything like that. But a fun little kayak on a really slow, easy kind of pond or a river, why not? That would be so much. It'd be so much fun. So I've just kind of gotten into it. I'm a big Jeep fan, and seeing what Jeeps are capable of doing and where they can go, I'm like, God, I want to go there. That would be so cool. But it's also a little dangerous depending on where you go. So I don't know. I'm not doing it because of like, ooh, I want to be risky and dangerous. It's because I want to see some of these places I've never seen. Like I was telling Scott, I don't know, a few days ago that I grew up in Wisconsin and I was always in such a hurry to leave. And then by the time I was 18, I'm like, I'm out. I'm going to school out of state. And then after college, I went straight to Los Angeles, and I was in LA for 20 plus years. And now that I'm back, I'm like, I don't know my state at all. I've been to Madison a bunch of times, and then I think Stevens Point is like the northest I've ever been, which is silly because really the most beautiful part of the state is the northern part of the state. So I've just gotten it into me where I want to be like an outsider, just rediscovering the state that I grew up in. And
so you haven't even been to Door County, which is a beautiful part as well. Oh man, I didn't know that. Yeah. Man, I'd love to go with you sometime because I had a family member had a log cabin up in Door County. So that was kind of our easy road trip to go up to Door County and explore a little bit. Before we went live, we were talking about some travel ideas. And Cliff, you were speaking about the idea of doing a drive around Lake Superior. Oh,
that's great. But yeah, Door County, you want to go to Door County, though. Just bring money. You'll be okay.
Right.
Yeah, the drive around Lake Superior is really very special and very, very wonderful. And I've done it a couple times. I have a 30-year-old little red BMW Roadster, a little two-seater with about 160,000 miles on it. Runs perfect. Wow. And we drove that all the way around, top down all the way. So,
wow. So you went all the way like through Thunder Bay. I'm just looking at a map now.
So for somebody like Max, who is maybe wanting to get their toes wet, although not literally, into being out there in the wilderness a bit more, what are some of the base skills that you definitely want to make sure you have right off the bat before you get out there?
The base skills, I've laid out in my really simple little book, Basic Illustrated Camping. And I also did a little video called The Forgotten Skills. There are really only a few, to be quite honest. One, you got to know how to build a fire without pouring a bunch of kerosene on it. You have to know how to stormproof your tent. And stormproofing your tent doesn't mean just setting it up. There's some things that you have to do. Okay. I remember one time we were in a state park in Minnesota. We had a major storm. Every tent blew down except ours, like mine. Why? Because I know how to rig it. So it's not that people have a problem. They don't want to learn stuff. They want to buy stuff. They figure if they buy something, it'll solve their problem. When the truth is, skill is always more important than things. So, I tell people, don't spend your money on stuff until you learn about stuff, because you're going to go into an equipment shop and they're going to sell you a bunch of stuff you don't need and have no use for. And you don't need to spend a bunch of money. Actually, the pots and cook sets and things that I've used commercially on my trips are stuff that I bought in discount stores. I'm not going to spend $200 for some titanium pot set. Why? So, you can, and clothes are the same way. Most of the outdoor clothes now are designer clothes. They're not really designed for function in the wild outdoors. There are some that are, but you got to know what is. Meanwhile, you can't go wrong with military surplus. You can do military surplus, you'll get good stuff. You won't look great, but that stuff's tested. So, basically stormproofing, fire building. If you're going to go off the road, map reading skills, and people totally dismiss this now. I got a GPS. Well, guess what? I have one too. And I know people who've relied on it for major trips and left their map at home, and then they got totally lost or the unit was damaged. You need to understand basic map and compass skills before you move on to a GPS. An outdoor GPS is not the same thing as the one in your car. Right? So, I would say, and then you need to know how to put together foods, because if you're going to be going for more than a few days, you don't have refrigeration. So, I would say, and you need a few knot skills. A few. You don't need a whole knot book. I wrote a knot book. I can't remember how to do all those knots because you only need 3 or 4, and you're never going to use more than 3 and 4 probably in a lifetime. But people love knot books. Indeed, my publisher once told me, Cliff, I'm going to bet my next year's money coming in on a knot book. So they're everywhere. But anyway, that was my rant for the day.
I love it. I love the passion. I love it. And all of those things I need to learn. I do. I need to learn how to do all of this.
I was going to actually bring up food. Like if you think you're going to be, out for, let's say 3 days, or like, how do you know, like you said, it can't be perishable, but like how much food per day? How do you, like, what is there an equation for that?
Well, I don't know if there's a real equation. They used to say with freeze-dried, dehydrated foods, you need 2 pounds per day.
Okay.
On my trips, I found people needed more than that. So I basically figure 3 cups of food per person. All right. And whatever it is. And, if you're only going to be out for 3 days, you can take what you want. It doesn't matter. You can take fresh bacon. You can take steaks. Hamburger doesn't do well, but steaks and chops and whatever you want, if you can carry it. Now, if you can't carry it, there's another solution. One, you can go into a big store like REI or Cabela's or whatever. You can walk down the aisle, throwing freeze-dried package into your cart. My view on this is 40 years ago, they were terrible. 40 years later, they're still terrible, and the reason why they are is because they try to do everything with adding boiling water. You can't cook meat and rice at the same speed or whatever. All right. So my advice is, to people is read my little basic illustrated cooking, which is long out of print, but it's on my website, or read one of my classic books like Canoeing, Wild Rivers, or Camping's Top Secrets, and read how to do it yourself. Get a dehydrator and a vacuum sealer, and you're in business. And then you can dehydrate just about anything, vacuum seal the stuff when you're done. And it's a total done deal. That's what I would recommend, because what you do at home is going to be better than what you're buying in one of those freeze-dried packets. The only advantage of the put together freeze-dried packet is you open the top and you pour boiling water in there and you wait a few minutes and then you go and eat it. It's like you do with your dog food. You put some water on it, you let it set up, and then the dog just wags his tail and goes. I have so many stories that I could tell you about those kind of foods, but that's probably for another time.
No, that's great. CliffCanoe.com is the website where you can find these books, and you have quite the library. I'm very impressed.
So I was telling Cliff and Scott before we started recording that I'm planning a trip around the perimeter of Wisconsin. I am now seriously thinking, okay, I'm going to have to drive around Lake Superior because that's amazing. But you immediately said, why are you doing that? So are there places that I shouldn't even bother with, Cliff, or what?
The other thing you can do is drive around Lake Michigan. That's a great drive too. It's a shorter drive, but it's a great drive too. The only thing is you drive around Michigan, you got to go around Chicago, which is not the best. But once you get beyond that and you get into Michigan and you drive around, you all these little fishing towns and things. That's really a fun drive, and it's really beautiful coming back through Wisconsin. And you can probably do the drive around Michigan in 4 days, I would say.
And how long was the Lake Superior trip? That had to have been a week.
I don't remember. It's a big lake.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's probably more like a 6-day, 7-day trip. I don't know. I can't remember now. Depends how fast you go. There's a lot of places to stop along Lake Superior. The Michigan drive is fun too, because you're going to see all these little places that sell fresh caught fish, and the fish is all smoked. It's all smoked. And man, and I don't particularly, I have this thing about fish. I'm a fish snob. And the reason why is on my trips up in the far north, we've caught so many fish, and you fillet them right there and you cook them. And I don't care. You can go in the best restaurant in the world and it's not going to taste as good as that.
Wow.
You can pay $100 a meal. It won't, because the minute you freeze that fish, something changes. Okay. Not all that much, but believe it, it's plenty. So that's one of the advantages that you're going to get. You're going to get it right there, and that smoked fish is just delicious.
Let's get into writing a little bit.
Okay.
So, and also, have you been able to make being an outdoorsman a career?
No, that's why I taught for 35 years.
You taught. Who was it? Right.
Was it Hemingway who said, "You can make a fortune writing, but you can't make a living"?
Yeah.
What people don't understand about these outdoor books is that it's kind of we're the fringe of the fringe. When people think outdoors, they think state parks or they think national parks. A few might be a little braver and say Boundary Waters canoe area. But if you say you do canoeing in the wilderness here where I live, oh, you've been to the Boundary Waters? Yeah, I've probably been to the Boundary Waters 200 times, but that's not where I like to go best. But to do what I did, do these trips in Canada and Alaska, you got to have some skills. And because the only difference between doing those trips in the far north and doing them down here is if you capsize in the Boundary Waters and you got your life jacket on, and unless you do something stupid and the water's intensely cold and you're a half a mile from shore, you're going to survive. You capsize on a lake in northern Canada where the water temperature is 42 degrees, you're not going to make it to shore. I don't care how good a swimmer you are. In fact, a friend of mine, Bob O'Hara, who is one of the most respected canoeists in North America, laughingly in one of his presentations, he said, "Wear your life jackets. It makes the bodies easier to find."
Oh my God!
Now so I guess I guess that's what I'm saying. That's why what Frisch and Krish said to me, I value.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But so you have, though, been able to, you've written a lot of articles also for different magazines. And I believe you've consulted maybe on some equipment design.
Yeah. I've done some consulting on equipment, over the years. And I've probably done 500 or so magazine articles. I will say that my writing did put my kids through college, and it's given me some supplementary income, but it was never enough to just retire for. I think you can do it, but you're going to be killing yourself. You're going to be working 6-7 days a week probably if you're writing the kind of stuff that I did. Now, if you're a hook and bullet guy, in other words, you're writing stories for fishermen. There's a lot of fishermen. If you're writing hunting story or gun stuff, you can make it. In fact, many years ago, I almost was going to become a gun writer. I wanted to. When I spent a couple of years of my life on the Army rifle team, and we set a record in 1964 that I don't think's been equaled since. But when I started applying for jobs like that, that's all I got back was, well, you got a forestry degree. We need, you can work like what I'm saying. You could work for Remington Farms. Like what I want to do is raise baby grouse or ducklings or something so they can be released and go boom. So now it's hard.
Sure.
You don't write this stuff for money. You write it for heart.
Yeah. Well, I just always do find it impressive. And sometimes when I go to schools to talk, I just tell kids, though, that you follow your passions, what you really are interested in. And these other opportunities pop up that you didn't necessarily plan on. And suddenly you are making at least a side income doing the thing you love most, which is pretty. I mean, that's what life's about, right? Trying to just pursue what you love.
Yeah.
And I never could have done all these big trips.
When did you start, going from, I have all this experience to I should share what I've learned and start writing and sharing that knowledge?
There was a magazine many years ago. I don't even remember the name of the magazine. No, it was called Wilderness Camping. You go back 40 years, there was a lot of camping magazines and several canoe magazines. Now there's basically nothing. There's some RV stuff. That's pretty much it. People now, everything asks questions online. But anyway, I read a story about this guy taking recommending a 14-foot aluminum canoe for wilderness travel, and I became incensed about it. And my wife said, well, if you're so ticked off about it, why don't you write an article? I said, okay, I will. And so I wrote an article, everything you need to know about wilderness canoeing. Yeah, really broad. For some reason, I got it published. And then I got some work with the Minnesota DNR, and I wrote a whole lot of their outdoor pamphlets. And I developed map and compass navigation curriculum for the hunter safety program, which then later became part of my school curriculum when I taught. And then it just escalated from there.
Yeah, but it's basically like what you said, Scott, that you write something because you care about it, and eventually opportunities pop up that allow you to do this and then that, and it's still along the same lines of what you're passionate about. I mean, if I were to give any advice to kids who are coming out of high school or something, focus on that. Don't just focus on chasing your paycheck. Because
the other thing that you could add to this is, if you really know your stuff, really know your stuff, and you read the books and pamphlets and things by other people, you're going to start rolling your eyes at a lot of their recommendations. Okay. Sure. And I mean, I have a couple that I have one that just completely follows me and haunts me wherever I go, but I won't give in because I'm right. But you have to remember that many of these pamphlets and stuff that you see in national park, state park, and whatever are written for not just for beginners, but basically if they have to choose between what's the best way to do this and what for sure will keep you safe, even if it's not best, that's where they're going to go. A real good example of this is how they treat lightning. They treat lightning as when a lightning storm comes up. Okay, say if you're on a boat on the water, get to shore immediately. All right, let's talk. If you consider that, the tallest trees are near the shoreline. They're getting some light. Back in the coniferous forest, it's dark and they tend to be more stunted. Lightning strikes, where's it going to hit? It's going to hit a shoreline tree. I had this happen on a canoe trip, and my friend's canoe was heading right towards that shoreline, and the lightning and I'm yelling out, no, Al, and it hit, and it popped out half of a tree, and the ashes came right down on his canoe. If he'd have been 6 feet closer, he'd be dead today.
Wow.
Or they tell you at night, here you are, you're camping, and lightning at night, get out of your tent and go hide under a rock face or something like that. Yeah, it's raining bloody murder. It's ice cold. You're snug in your sleeping bag. You're going to get out of your tent. Yeah, sure. Okay, the point is that may be the safest thing, but nobody's going to do it. So what you want to do is you want to give people advice that, okay, maybe it's not quite as safe, but they'll do it. Mm-hmm. And the advice that I give them is, okay, if you got a foam sleeping pad, fold your sleeping pad in half. Get on your knees, okay, with your heels touching the ground, or get on your sort of sit up with your feet on the ground and your butt on the ground. If a lightning strike goes through your tent, you'll burn your butt and you'll burn your feet, but you won't die because you're laying down, because you won't get the current through your heart. So that's what I tell people to do. And you got to storm-proof your tent so that no water gets in no matter what. And that's a very simple skill that people fight with me over.
So if I'm out on the lake and there is a storm coming, is it better to just stay on the lake?
No, it's not better to stay on the lake. What you want to do is, and this has been debated, but I've seen it work. So the point is, people want a foolproof thing, okay? There's no such thing as a foolproof thing, but this works pretty well. You want to get into what's called the cone of protection. In other words, there's a tree here. Okay, so there's a cone of protection that extends outward about 45 degrees. You want to stay in this cone of protection, which is right here. So if lightning strikes the tree, okay, you're down here and you'll be okay. Huh. Maybe, okay, maybe not. But the problem with being out on a lake or wherever when you have a major storm is got wind, boys. That got big wind, and unless you're on some kind of a lake or at a beautiful sandy shore, you can't get ashore. You try, and you're going to destroy your boat. It's going to get shoved right up into the rocks on a northern river. Mm-hmm. So it depends where you are. So there's a lot of things that you basically need to learn and understand when you do this stuff. So this is simple stuff, but it's knowledge, and a more durable canoe isn't going to protect you.
It is important. I'm a weather nerd. That's my skill set for outdoor stuff. So it is important to note that most lightning strikes, most people that get struck by lightning are hit indirectly. As you were talking about, it travels through the ground. Right. Even once it hits the ground or a tree, that's still going out there. So yeah, limit your contact with the ground. And trees full of sap explode often, as you were talking about with that story with your friend. It's gnarly. If at all possible, have a phone where you can keep an eye on the radar and don't be on the water to start with, if you can help it. Wow. I'd love to hear a little bit about an exotic location, because in your travels, you list the Canadian Arctic, Norway, Sweden, Costa Rica, many of the U.S. states. If what just comes out off the top of your head when you think of one of your most exotic journeys?
A lot of people consider going to a foreign country exotic. I consider that travel. Okay? The most exotic to me location was where Susie and I got married, which was at the third highest falls. I think it's the third highest falls in North America. Wilberforce Falls drops about 165 feet through a 3-mile canyon. That's pretty spectacular. Not too far from Bathurst Inlet on, well, basically the Arctic Ocean. You've gone all the way to the ocean, and you're on this canyon, this precipice that is 160 feet above the river, and the only way you could get there then was by canoe. Now they actually have a way to bring a float plane into to an area below that and bring sports in just to see Wilberforce Falls, because it's quite spectacular. So to me, I'd say that's the most exotic. It's not so much in places to me; it's been exotic experiences. I mean, seeing polar bear coming right into your camp, grizzlies coming in, herds of thousands of caribou. Caribou are my favorite. I don't know why. I love caribou. Seeing the mom caribous in their all their little, they have a little they all yard up in one place with all the babies, and the males are on the outer perimeter sort of watching and seeing if there's danger, and the little babies. I mean, those kind of experiences. You tell people about some of these things you've done. Basically, you don't in many cases, because they don't believe you, or they think you're making it up.
Well,
so there, I have to jump to this only
Yeah.
because we're getting almost to the hour mark. But so Clarissa in an email on April 20th saying, Dad, this is Scott introducing us, etc. He wants to have you on a podcast with his co-host about your experiences with magical things on canoe trips, like the Guide, the Raven, and the Wedding. And I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm in. I want to know what this
there's
is.
more actually. Let me say that I'm an atheist. Okay, I was brought up Jewish. I don't believe in God, but I do believe in an afterlife and spirits, and I've had a lot of experience with this. So I don't know how many episodes, how many things you want to hear, but I'll start at the beginning. The first thing happened when I was a forester. I was 21 years old. We had just finished putting in a continuous forest inventory plot. We were tired. We were driving home, and I was driving a little Jeep CJ, with a short wheelbase. This is a mountain road, and you're going around because there are you go off that road, there's nothing, no protection whatsoever. 300 feet down. And we're in a bit of a hurry and we're tired. And I'm going around to the right, making a right curve. The curve was the width of the Jeep plus maybe another 10 feet. That's it. So there's no way for two-way traffic. And as I came around the curve, bang, the rear end slid out. And it was sliding just right towards the edge of this cliff. We're going over. And it's like I felt a hand stop me. I was this far from the edge of the cliff. And there was a log truck about 45 seconds behind me.
Oh.
All right. And I'm on a curve. He wouldn't have seen me.
Yeah.
There was 4 of us in the car. We immediately all got out, and I was just so shook up. And I remember we grabbed the rear end of that thing and we slid it over. I don't know how we had the power to do it, but we did. And then then I jumped in the right seat. I couldn't drive at that point. Another guy got the thing in first gear, and he got it going. And that log truck was 100 feet behind us. So that was the first one. Wilberforce Falls was interesting because you're above the tree line, you're above the Arctic Circle, and if it's warm, there are bugs everywhere. I mean, bugs like you can't even believe. So Susie and I were getting married at Wilberforce Falls. That story's in my book, Canoeing Wild Rivers. But just very briefly, we got dressed. Susie put on her wedding dress and so forth, and she had leggings on and knee-high rubber boots, and I was dressed pretty much the same way. So usually it doesn't get this warm that north, but it got up to 75 degrees, if I remember. And we had a wedding cake it was a pudding cake that we had protected, and it was melting. That's how warm it was. And so as we're walking up, we had to walk up about, maybe 300 yards or something to the top of where we were going to get married. The bugs were fierce. They were fierce. Okay. And then as we got real close to the wedding spot, all of a sudden they stopped. And one of the guys said, "What's going on here?" I said, "They're still there." I said, "They don't go away. They go and hide in the tundra. Watch." So I took my foot and I went pow, pow, pow on the ground. Nothing. Pow. Nothing. This is really strange. All right. So to make a long story short, when we got up to the top after the wedding got over. I think this was about midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. At that latitude, it never really gets dark. It just gets gray. So we're walking back, and as we're walking back, okay, the next thing that happened is we decided we'd go skinny dipping in a tundra pond. This is a little tundra pond. Now, you don't do this. There's a million bugs in those things.
Oh, gosh.
No bugs. All right, so then we get dressed and we're walking back to the canoe. No bugs, no bugs. And then as we got to the canoe, I had a tent with a big vestibule on the front. No, the vestibule isn't like an alcove where you can store stuff. I picked up Susie to carry her over the vestibule. The minute I picked her up, bang, bugs. You explain it. I can't. But the most interesting one was I was teaching an outdoor skills class at a local Boy Scout camp, how to build a fire and sharpen knives and that sort of stuff. And afterwards, when we were done, everybody left except this one young woman I'd say she was in her mid-30s, maybe. She came up to me and she said, Cliff, you may think I'm crazy. Exact words. He made me promise I would tell you. He made me promise I would tell you. She said, I am a channeler. I said, that's nice. What's a channeler? And so she says, I have the ability to communicate with the spirits. She says, you can think this is crazy or whatever. I said, oh, okay. And then she said, you have a guide. I said, oh, what's a guide? She said, well, it's like a guardian angel, you know, like she says, everybody has like one. She says, but you have more than one. And I don't know any of the others, but I do know this one. Okay. And he made me promise I would tell you. She said that several times. Mm-hmm. You have an Indian guide. He follows you on all your canoe trips. He keeps you safe and he wants to be acknowledged. I said, how do I do that? She said, I don't know. I've been told what I should tell you. And so basically, have a nice life. See ya. And I was so got. I mean, I had her contact information. Why didn't I contact her and ask her more? I didn't. There was something that made me not do that. And I thought about this. I thought about what life is going to be as a spirit. And I think everybody's got it wrong. Of course, they think they got it right and everybody else is right. I think that what happens is when you die, you become the spirit. You don't wander around. Maybe you're probably reborn later, but for a while you got to pay your dues. And I think your dues as a spirit are you've got to follow somebody around for a lifetime, give them advice and keep them safe. Doesn't mean they're going to follow it. Okay. She said, you have an Indian guide. So I got to thinking about this. So here's this experienced Indian who spent a lot of time in the northern bush, lived there. He dies, and he's got this big book. And in this book are the names of everybody living, where they live. He thumbs through, oh, this guy's from Chicago. Oh, I don't want to do that. Okay, this guy's from Detroit. I don't want to do that. Oh, look, this guy has done trips down a river in Saskatchewan or Manitoba, whatever, where I grew up. I want him. And I think that's what it is. So that, you know, that was absolutely the weirdest one. Now, Susie had a very unusual one too. When she was younger, she took the solo canoe, which I had just sold her, which we actually sold not too long ago. Wow. But she took that solo canoe on a canoe trip in the Boundary Waters in October. She went into Canada. Okay, of course, illegally, but whatever. She wanted to see the pictographs. She found the pictographs. And when she did, she put her hand up on the pictograph. And as soon as she did that, an eagle flew right over her head, messing up her hair. And at the same time, a fish jumped. Let's explain that.
Yeah.
So, you know, there are a lot the Native Americans were very spiritual because a lot of stuff happens on these wilderness trips that are really kind of unexplainable. I mean, there have been times when I've been going down a river and something says to me, there's a danger ahead. I can't see it, but I feel it. And I've gone ashore and I walk down and look, bingo, a major falls. No sound. Just flowing straight down like that. Wow. You know, stuff like that.
Oh, I love that.
I love that so much. I mean, I think the idea of reincarnation is something that just fascinates me. Because I've been told by a channeler, if you will, that I have multiple guides as well. One of which is someone who was a part of the Wyatt Earp gang. And Doc Holliday is who she named. And I was like, no way. No way. But what was weird about it is that prior to this channeler telling me this, and she knew nothing about me, my friends and I in college would joke around because we would watch the movie Tombstone with Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer. probably once a week. Like it was just on in the background, and we would joke around about being the reincarnations of Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. Like we would joke about that. And then this woman 25, 30 years later says, I see this man and I think he's been with you. And because you were friends with him in their group, that's why he's still with you, because you actually knew each other when you were living. And it's Doc Holliday. And I remember getting goosebumps like, what? I have never posted anything on social media about why I don't make it public. I'm a Doc Holliday fan or anything. So I believe this stuff. It's weird. And there's no way to prove it, of course, but you can feel it. No, I'm fascinated by all that. And so could you argue that the hand that you felt when you almost went over in the CJ might have been your Indian guide?
It might have been, because cars don't just do that.
Yeah.
When they go into a drift, they drift. This didn't just drift. It drifted around the corner. It should have drifted right off the cliff.
Sure,
it
right.
didn't. It's drifting towards it, and it's like I felt a force saying no. And then it actually went around the corner and stopped about this far from the edge of going over this cliff.
I've interviewed somebody about the idea of guardian angels before, and it was eye-opening. It's also just great to have different perspective and different ideas. And to sometimes when you're in the middle of a car accident, you don't have time to pause and take a breath. But in your daily life, sometimes if maybe there's a crossroads of trying to make a tough decision, try to just take a moment of meditation or whatever you want to call it, and try to appeal to whatever guides might be around you, and see if suddenly you have an intuitive pull. And there might be something, who knows what you want to call it, the universe, a guide, some self-clarity. But yeah, I mean, it happens. There really is something when you ask for that kind of help.
I did acknowledge my guide. I acknowledge him.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. How did you acknowledge him?
Well, it's in Camping's Top Secrets. I want to read you the acknowledgement. I had to be careful or I'd look like a kook.
We all do.
Acknowledgement. Okay. In my book, Expedition Canoeing, a guide to canoeing wild rivers in North America, I wrote, canoeing the wild rivers of the far north makes one understand why primitive man feels so close to God. I am not a religious man, but I have brushed with death often enough in the bush to appreciate the caring spirits who guide my actions. I've spent nearly a lifetime canoeing remote rivers in northern Canada, and neither I nor anyone in my charge has ever suffered a serious illness or injury. I believe that I owe much of my good luck to a kindly spirit who watches my back and helps me make wise decisions. I often feel the presence of my river angel, and I wish to say thanks.
That's great.
That's nice. I love that. Yeah. Well, kind of like what I was saying to Scott, I think you could argue maybe that there's a connection to when you are out in nature, you're away from technology, you're away from outside influence of just, the day-to-day in society. And I think it is a little bit easier to get into somewhat more of a meditative state, which then allows you to pay more attention to your intuition. And a lot of people say that your intuition is directly connected to some form of a guide or a guardian angel or something. Like, to me, that makes sense. There's a logical connection.
Well, you're right. One of the big problem, of course, we see on these trips now is, I don't know, people go on these trips to get away from this technology, yet every day people have to be on that cell phone. They got us, so the only way to deal with that is you go on a trip where you do not have cell coverage.
Yeah.
And then that's it. The phone, you might as well turn the phone off because you're done. Then after a few days, people start getting used to what's around them without having to be entertained by this machine.
Right.
The problem is that where the machine works is growing and growing and growing until ultimately it will be everywhere, and you will not be able to get away from it unless you want to turn it off. Okay. So everything has changed in tripping because of this. I mean, in the old days, when we started, if you wanted communications, you rented a big Canadian radio, and it was this big. Then came satellite phones. Okay. Now we got all these satellite communicators. We got cell phones. So now what's happened is that people get in the middle of one of these trips, and if something goes wrong, I want to quit right now. Plane, come and get me. All right. And unfortunately, that really changes the entire experience for them and everybody else.
Cliffcanoe.com. You should all check it out if you're interested in any kind of outdoor activity. Even like, I don't think we're necessarily saying you have to go and do these extreme adventures through the wilderness. I think it's just, for me, I'm taking away the idea that this just further proves my own inner intuition of wanting to go out and just enjoy nature. That's all it is. It's really what we're trying to do. I mean, obviously you've taken it to levels where did you ever feel like you were trying to conquer something, that you were like there, or was it just an experience?
No. If you feel that you have to conquer something, you are setting yourself up for trouble. Many people who like go to climb Mount Everest or whatever, I don't know what it costs to do that, $50,000 or something like that. So you get to a base camp and you know you got 2 more weeks or whatever, and you got to be back to work, and you get antsy. And your guide says, it's pretty dicey. I don't think we should do this. Look, I paid $50,000 to do this. You get me to the top, I'll give you another 1,000 on top. Okay, bang, somebody dies. So, that's the problem with so much of this ecotourism today, is people pay a lot of money. They want to see this, and they don't realize it's different in the wilderness. You can't tell your employer, I'm going to be back on Monday. Maybe you won't be. One time I got stuck in Churchill, Manitoba for 5 days. My entire crew flew out. And the reason why I was stuck there was because the train ran off the track to take me back to Thompson, Manitoba. And they had to get a big thing in there to get. So I'm stuck there for 5 days with 5 canoes and 20 some packs. And then I had to deal with myself to get on that train. And then I had to load and unload that myself. Meanwhile, it was 5 days. So you never know when this is going to happen. And it does happen on wilderness trips. But I would just say, before we end all this, a lot of people look at the skills that I suggest, and they say, this is for guys going to the Arctic. I'm not going to the Arctic. Well, you know what? If you know how to bake a cake like a master chef, you can just mess around and make a great cake real fast. In other words, if you have some of these high-level skills, it'll make your trips in your state parks and national parks just a whole lot easier.
It's universal, and there's a lot of insightfulness there too about life. Life throws things at you, and you just have to roll with it.
Exactly. Yeah. So.
All right. Well, anything else, Scott? Anything you wanted to cover?
No. I'm surprised that we've talked this much about the wilderness and Bigfoot hasn't come up. No Yeti talk and nothing like that. But maybe a different episode. Before we let you go, just a big thank you and a shout out to Cliff's daughter, Clarissa Jacobson, somebody I'm a big fan of. She's a screenwriter and a filmmaker, a good friend. So she's the one that put us in contact with you. So thank you.
Well, thank you guys. She said you guys are awesome, and you are. So
all right. We lived up to it.
I'll keep you updated on any little trips and adventures that I take.
That'd be great. That'd be great, Max. So thanks for having me on, boys. And I'm sure our paddles will cross later.
I love it. Paddles will cross. All right. Thanks everybody for watching. As always, if you hear of any kind of fantastic story, share it with us, because you might be the next guest on the Fantastic Story Society, or maybe even join our society overall. So cheers, and may our paddles cross again in the future.
Okay. Best to you guys.